Your silence isn't just silence to her, it's a storm, a signal, a story she starts telling herself. In this video, we're uncovering what really goes through a woman's mind when a man decides to go silent. If you thought pulling away would protect your pride, your power, or your peace, you're missing what's quietly breaking on the other side. This isn't about mind games. This is about emotional intelligence and the cost of miscommunication. Stick around because this silence is louder than you think. Step 1, you said, silence isn't empty. It's loud in her mind. Silence isn't the absence of words. It's the presence of everything unsaid. And for a woman, when a man chooses silence, it's never just quiet. It becomes a heavy fog that fills every corner of her mind, pressing against her thoughts with questions, worries, and imagined answers. You think you're giving her space, but what you're really giving her is a mental battlefield where she has to fight off every insecurity you just confirmed by saying nothing. The male silence that feels so safe and controlled on your end is a deafening storm on hers. When a man goes silent, she doesn't see it as a strategy or an emotional boundary. She sees it as withdrawal, as abandonment. Her mind doesn't interpret silence as calm. It processes it as chaos. That void becomes a mirror reflecting every fear she's tried to suppress. He's losing interest. He's disappointed. Maybe I said something wrong. She doesn't need proof. She only needs silence, because in that stillness, her imagination builds entire narratives, and those stories are rarely kind to her. A woman can tolerate words that sting far more than silence that suffocates. When you speak, at least she knows where she stands. When you stay silent, she has no footing. Her mind spins, her chest tightens, and the absence of explanation feels more like punishment than peace. You may have just needed time to think. You may have genuinely wanted space. But if you don't communicate that, you're not giving her time. You're giving her torment. She lies awake thinking of what she did to push you away, not realizing that your silence has nothing to do with her and everything to do with your own inability to express yourself. And still she will blame herself? Because that's what silence does to a woman who cares deeply. It tricks her into thinking she is the problem, not the gap in communication, not your personal turmoil, not your fear of confrontation. Just her presence, her effort, her love. She starts to walk on eggshells around a man who hasn't even told her what's wrong. She shrinks herself to avoid pushing him further away. Her tone softens, her texts slow down, her vulnerability disappears, not because she doesn't want to reach out, but because every moment of your silence chips away at the certainty she once felt in your presence. She replays past conversations in her head, looking for clues. Something he said, something she missed. She becomes a detective in her own love story, trying to solve the case of a man who simply refuses to speak. And the deeper the silence gets, the louder the fear becomes. She's no longer just wondering what you're thinking. She's already convinced you're slipping away. And here's what's cruel about that quiet. It doesn't even have to be long, a few hours, a day, that's enough. Because for a woman who is emotionally invested, silence isn't measured in minutes. It's measured in meaning. She'll never tell you how much noise she hears in your quiet, how much weight your silence carries, how it wraps around her mind like a question with no answer. She'll try to act like it doesn't affect her, like she understands, but internally she's unraveling. Not because she's fragile, but because she's connected. Because she feels what you don't say more than you'll ever understand. You thought going silent was an escape, but for her, it was the beginning of doubt, confusion, and quiet heartbreak. She waits for a message, for a call, for a sign that everything is okay, that you're still in this, that you still care. And in that waiting, her mind becomes a battleground because every second without a word from you sounds like a rejection she was never prepared for. Step 2, she questions her worth instantly. The moment a man chooses silence over communication, distance over clarity, a woman's mind doesn't sit still. It spirals, not slowly, instantly. She questions her worth not out of weakness, but because she ties her value to emotional connection. A man pulling away, even momentarily, feels to her like something is broken, and instinctively, the first place she looks for blame is inward. It's not that she wants to think she's the problem, it's that no explanation feels more immediate, more believable than the one where she simply wasn't enough. You may think she's overthinking, dramatizing, or reacting too emotionally, but what you fail to see is the speed with which doubt creeps into her spirit. One cold response, one ignored message, one shift in your tone, and the version of herself she built in your eyes begins to crumble. She questions her voice, her presence, her timing. She wonders if she said too much, cared too fast, asked for too little, or expected too much. Her entire being is reevaluated in the silence you casually offer as protection for your own thoughts. She may walk confidently, speak powerfully, and carry herself with grace, but inside, in the moments your connection feels off, she's analyzing every detail of her identity. That's the emotional labor she silently performs. She doesn't tell you this. She doesn't want to seem insecure or needy, but her self-worth is tied to how emotionally safe she feels around you. And when you retreat, even subtly, it's not your silence she hears. It's the sound of her self-doubt screaming inside her chest. A woman doesn't need loud fights to feel unloved. She doesn't need betrayal to feel unwanted. All it takes is a quiet withdrawal, a shift in your energy, a void where your warmth used to live. And instantly, her mind starts looking for a reason. You don't text like you used to. You don't laugh with her the same way. She feels you fading before you even realize you're doing it. And while you might be going through your own storm, she interprets that disconnect as a sign that something in her wasn't enough to keep you anchored. This questioning of worth happens silently. She won't come begging for answers, not always. She won't immediately confront you, especially if her pride still holds. Instead, she becomes smaller in the ways you don't notice. She holds back her feelings. She stops initiating conversations. She second-guesses her responses. She tells herself, don't be too much. Don't scare him away. Don't ask too many questions. She shrinks her authentic self to fit the space your silence forced her into. And the worst part is, she does this all while trying to maintain her dignity. She thinks back to moments where you praised her, laughed with her, made her feel seen. And now the contrast is unbearable. It makes her wonder if she ever truly mattered to you, or if she was just a temporary comfort. Easy to adore when convenient, easy to ignore when things get too real. The validation she once felt starts slipping through her fingers, and she's left holding questions instead of certainty. She replays memories not for nostalgia, but to find evidence she was ever valued the way you made her believe. She starts editing herself, adjusting her behavior in hopes of restoring your interest. She compares herself to other women you've known, in silence, in secret, and with a pain she hides behind smiles. Every delay in your response feels personal. Every unanswered call feels like rejection. You may have just needed space to process, to think, to deal, but she reads it as a verdict on her worth. And the terrifying part is, she trusts your silence more than your compliments. Because when your energy changes, she listens with her heart, not her ears. Step 3, she starts filling in the blanks. When a man chooses not to speak, a woman doesn't wait in stillness. She moves into overdrive, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. She doesn't just notice the silence, she personalizes it. She starts to fill in the blanks, not because she wants to assume the worst, but because the human mind cannot rest in uncertainty. And a woman's heart, when left without clarity, becomes a storyteller. She writes entire scripts based on your silence, dialogues you never said, actions you never took, reasons you never gave. Because when you give her nothing, her mind creates something, and that something is almost always laced with fear. You think you're giving space. You think your quietness is neutral. But for her, your silence doesn't just create distance, it demands explanation. And where you do not explain, she begins to imagine. She remembers your past patterns. She replays every interaction, every shift in tone, every delayed response. She starts wondering if you've grown tired of her, if you've found someone else, if she somehow became less interesting, less attractive, less worthy of your attention. She reads between lines that were never written because in your silence, her need for emotional safety doesn't go away, it multiplies. Her heart becomes a courtroom and your absence is the witness she interrogates. She analyzes your mood the last time you spoke. She goes over the words you used, not just what you said, but how you said it. She checks timestamps on messages. She watches your online activity. Not out of obsession, but because she's trying to build a sense of truth in a world where your silence has made everything uncertain. Her intuition is alive, but without facts, even her instincts start to betray her. She doesn't know what's real anymore, because the man who once made her feel secure has now gone quiet, and that quiet breeds doubt faster than you can imagine. And so she builds stories. Painful ones, the kind that keep her awake at night, staring at her phone, debating whether to reach out or wait. She rehearses messages in her head that she never sends because she doesn't want to seem needy, even though she's breaking inside. She wonders if you're testing her, if you want her to chase, if this is your way of punishing her for something unspoken. She even considers if you're dealing with your own pain, but stops herself from assuming grace because you didn't offer her that transparency. And when transparency is missing, assumptions take its place. Women don't just want words, they want connection. When that connection goes dark, they don't switch off. They dig deeper, trying to make sense of things. She might play it cool on the outside. She might laugh with her friends, post a story, keep her head held high, but her heart is full of unfinished conversations. Silent paragraphs she'll never speak aloud. She's searching for answers not to control you, but to feel safe within herself again. Because emotional uncertainty doesn't just hurt, it drains her. And when the man she trusted most becomes silent, her mind starts solving a puzzle that you left halfway built. You may not realize it, but in withholding your voice, you gave her questions instead of comfort. You handed her silence and expected peace, but she heard chaos. You backed away, thinking it would be temporary, and meanwhile, she started stitching together explanations with threads made of pain, fear, and fragmented hope. She reads old texts, trying to remember what changed. She thinks about other women and wonders if they're getting the version of you she's now being denied. She fills in the blanks with everything she's afraid to ask directly, because deep down, she's not sure she'd be able to handle the real answer if you ever gave it. Step 4, her insecurity doesn't need evidence. Her insecurity doesn't knock politely. It doesn't wait for facts. It doesn't ask for proof. All it needs is a crack, and silence is the perfect opening. A man doesn't have to say anything cruel. He doesn't have to accuse, abandon, or betray. He just has to stop speaking. He just has to pull back emotionally, mentally, or even for a few hours physically, and that stillness becomes the birthplace of her self-doubt. Because a woman's heart, when connected, listens for presence, not just words. And when presence disappears, even slightly, her mind starts to believe she's no longer enough. She doesn't need you to say she's not wanted. She doesn't need to catch you lying. She doesn't need late night calls that don't go through or lipstick stains on your collar. All she needs is the hollow space where your attention used to live. One unanswered message, one abrupt shift in tone, one unexplained delay in the rhythm she trusted. That's all it takes. Because when a woman feels emotionally invested, she doesn't wait for evidence to validate her fears. She feels things before they're spoken, and silence confirms everything her insecurity is waiting to hear. That insecurity is ancient. It's not born from you alone. It's a history she's lived, a pattern she's seen, maybe from a past relationship, a broken promise, an early childhood wound, or maybe from a man who once adored her and slowly stopped without warning. But what matters is that silence brings those ghosts back to life, and once they start whispering, they don't stop. You're too much. You're not enough. He's losing interest. You should have stayed quiet. These thoughts flood in, not because she's needy, but because your silence feels like rejection without the courtesy of explanation. You think she's being dramatic. You call her sensitive. But the truth is, she's not reacting to what you said. She's responding to what you didn't. The love you once gave freely now feels rationed. The warmth that used to feel effortless now feels earned. So she starts adjusting herself. She edits her messages before sending. She replays her last words to see if she said something wrong. She holds back on calling you even when she wants to, just so she doesn't come across as too much. And all the while, your silence continues to validate the story in her head that she's no longer the woman who excites you. She'll try to fight it internally. She'll remind herself of your past consistency, your sweet words, the depth you once showed her. But that silence continues to echo louder than any memory. And the worst part? She starts doubting her own worth. Not because you told her to, but because your emotional absence has made her question the space she takes up in your world. She starts comparing herself to other women. She becomes hyper-aware of how she looks, how she talks, how much she texts. She internalizes your quietness as a reflection of her fading value, and she does this all while trying to act like it doesn't hurt. You may still care for her. You may be going through your own private battles, but when you shut down, when you retreat into yourself without explanation, you don't just leave her waiting and you leave her wondering. And wondering is dangerous for a woman who loves deeply. Her thoughts race faster than your silence can justify. Her heart begins to close in on itself, convinced that the connection she once relied on has now become fragile, conditional, or even fake. She starts believing that maybe you were only present when it was convenient. And every time you withhold affection or communication without clarity, you teach her to doubt your love and, more painfully, to doubt herself. Step 5, she might go quiet too, but for different reasons. She might go quiet too, but not for the reasons you assume. When a woman falls into silence, it's rarely because she has nothing to say. It's because what she wants to say no longer feels safe to express. It's because she's exhausted from trying to speak into a void that never echoes back. She's been paying attention in not just to your words, but to your patterns, your energy, the way your tone shifts when she brings up something heavy, the way your interest fades when it's not convenient. So eventually her silence doesn't come from disinterest. It comes from disappointment. You might think she's moved on, that she doesn't care anymore, that she's unbothered, detached, or cold. But that silence is often her last form of self-protection. It's the shield she puts up when every time she tried to be vulnerable, she felt misunderstood or ignored. She's quiet now because she's tired of explaining her emotions to someone who treats her sensitivity like weakness. She's quiet because repeating herself only made her feel like a burden. She's quiet because she's realized that begging for clarity, affection, or reassurance only pushed you further away. So she stops trying. And yet, her silence is not passive. It's not numbness. It's a silence full of unsent messages, deleted paragraphs, held back tears, and unspoken thoughts. She rehearsed 100 times in her head, but could never say aloud without fearing she'd be met with indifference. She might still be smiling in public, showing up, doing life, but on the inside, she's pulling away, one unspoken hurt at a time. Her quietness is not a lack of love. It's a response to the lack she felt from you. She's learning that her emotional expression was never held gently in your hands, so now she chooses not to offer it at all. She doesn't want to argue. She doesn't want to beg. She doesn't want to explain herself one more time only to feel like nothing really changed. So she builds walls instead of bridges, not because she stopped caring, but because she cared too much for too long with no safety in return. Her silence is not a game. It's not punishment. It's not manipulation. It's survival. It's the decision to hold herself instead of reaching out to be held by someone who's shown her that presence is temporary and attention is seasonal. You may notice she no longer asks where things are going. She no longer brings up the distance between you. She doesn't tell you how she feels left out, neglected, or emotionally starved. That's not peace. That's her protecting herself from hearing one more excuse, one more deflection, one more version of "you're overthinking" when she knows her intuition has been right all along. Silence becomes her safe space, not because she's comfortable there, but because your emotional inconsistency made speaking too painful. And still, she watches you closely, not out of bitterness, but because a part of her still hopes you'll notice the shift. She hopes you'll realize that the woman who once poured herself into every conversation, who once checked in, initiated, cared deeply, is now quiet. Not because the love disappeared, but because it was never fully received. She wanted to be heard. She wanted to feel understood. She wanted a connection where her emotional world wasn't dismissed as drama or weakness. When she realized that wasn't going to happen, she learned how to carry her emotions alone, not out of strength, but out of necessity. So when she goes quiet, it's not the same silence you gave her. Yours may have been avoidance, escape, power play, but hers is layered with pain, self-respect, and an aching sense of clarity. She's not trying to control you. She's not trying to make you chase her. She's simply choosing herself in the most silent way possible, because every time she tried to choose you out loud, she felt more and more like she was losing herself in the process. Step 6. She thinks you're letting go, even if you haven't said it. Even if your mouth hasn't spoken a single word, your energy already has. Because a woman doesn't wait for the announcement, she feels the shift. She senses it in your delayed replies, in your shorter sentences, in the way your name shows up less and less on her screen. She notices the way the conversations that once felt full now feel forced. The way your laughter doesn't stretch the same, the way your presence, once steady and grounding, now flickers like a light trying to go out. You may still be around, technically, physically, digitally, but emotionally, she can feel you slipping through her hands like sand. She's trying not to hold too tightly, afraid that gripping harder will only make you disappear faster. You haven't said you're done, you haven't said you're leaving, but that doesn't matter because she doesn't need to hear it. She's already reading it in the pauses, in the silence, in the small things. You used to ask how her day was. Now you barely respond when she tells you. You used to notice her tone. Now you miss the change in it completely. You used to care about her thoughts. Now you only give answers, not attention. She used to feel like a priority. Now she feels like an option, and she's not blind to it. She's just been hoping she's wrong. But when a woman senses a man letting go, she starts preparing herself, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in quiet emotional self-preservation. She pulls back, not because she wants to, but because your detachment is beginning to suffocate her. She starts holding parts of herself in that she used to share freely. She starts second-guessing whether she should tell you when she's hurting, whether you even care like you used to.